Imagine if there was one trick you could use that could help you take your music from just alright to the next level. And now imagine that you don't even have to learn any new music theory to do it. Well, today I'm gonna break down a super smooth vintage 70s style composition that I made and show you a trick that I use to take it to the next level, which is using texture. So let's start off with the main part of the sample, which is the Rhodes. For the OGs on my channel, you're probably gonna notice that we're working in a different DAW today. And it's because I did start this sample in FL Studio, but don't worry, for the second half of this tutorial, we're gonna jump over to Logic. Sometimes I just like to switch things up a bit because I find it helps with my creativity and helps things from not getting too stale. For the Rhodes, I went with the Lounge Lizard EP4. Now, once I set the vibe with the Rhodes, the next thing that I did was I added this ARP, which kind of acts as its own melodic texture. For the ARP sound, I also went with the Lounge Lizard EP4. Now, to get the ARP to sound the way that it does, I started off by using the delay effect that's built into the EP4. Next up, I used an EQ to really carve out some frequencies that I didn't want in the sound. And then I ran it through an RC20. I turned on the noise function, and then I dialed up the follow so that the noise from the RC20 only plays while you're actually hearing the sound. And the reason why I did that was because I knew that I was gonna be adding textures to other sounds later on while I was making the sample. So I didn't want the noise sound from the ARP to run all the way through the sample and then become a distraction. Now, the next sound that I added was this vintage lead synth. And for this sound, I went with the Selena V from Arturia. Now, this lead is actually where I really started to add some noise texture to the sample. So I went with the free vinyl plugin from iZotope. I have my year set to 1970, RPM I have set to 33. The wear, I have it about 60%. And then as far as the dust is concerned, which is where you get that vinyl crispy sound, I have that set all the way up at 62%. And when you hear something like that on top of the lead and you mix it in just right and don't have it overtake the sample and become a distraction, it can really help your sample go from kind of thin and empty to actually sounding full and finished without even needing to add too many more sounds. And then the last thing that I did in FL Studio to basically just round out the sample was I added a hi-hat. So now I'm gonna head over to Logic and show you what I did over there. But first, real quick, I just wanted to let you know that if you're looking for some free, fire, royalty-free samples that you're free to use 100% in your next project or your next beat, just hit the link in the description and I'll email some right over to you. All right, let's get back to it. So here we are in Logic, and full disclosure, one of the things you're gonna learn about me is whenever I make my samples, I like to add an A and a B section. And the main reason I like to do that is because whenever someone uses them, I want them to have more options to work with. So for the B section here, I started off with this flute. And for this flute, I went with one of my favorite Kontakt libraries, which is Lumina by Project Sam. And for the effects, I didn't really do too much here because remember, we already have a lot of noise texture with the lead synth, so we don't want to keep adding and compounding on top of that. The next instrument that I added was these horns that are backing up the flute. And then I stuck to the same effects rule for the horns that I did with the flute. For the rest of the instruments that I added to the sample, I decided to treat them more like ear candy or melodic textures. So I started off with this piano. So when you hear it by itself, it sounds really atmospheric, and then when you hear it in context later on, you'll hear more of how that kind of adds texture to the sample. And then the last thing that I added was these 2 guitar effects. For the first one, I pretty much drenched it in delay and reverb. For the delay effect, I used the replica from Native Instrument, and then I routed it to an aux that has an H-verb. And then for the second effect, I'm also drenching this one in delay, but for this one, I'm using the Galaxy Tape Echo from UAD. So now let's hear the difference between the clean version of the sample and then the full version with all the textures added. So here are 3 keys you could take away and use for your own production. Applying vinyl or even tape effects can really help to enhance the lo-fi quality of a sound and make your composition sound more complete. Create atmosphere with melodic sounds and delay. Adding delay and noise effects to instruments, like in this case with the ARP and the lead synth, can really help to create a more atmospheric and vintage vibe. And last, but probably the most important part, don't overdo it. It's really crucial to balance added textures to avoid overcrowding the mix. Being mindful of how you add texture effects by either using EQ or just cutting it out at certain parts helps to ensure that the textures that you add enhance rather than distract from the overall sound. If you like this tutorial, but you want to learn how to make your own soulful samples that have a little bit more energy and they're a lot more epic, check out this video right here.